Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome back to Honest About the Irish, brought to you by B-Man is Mad. Final score from Atlanta, Notre Dame 31, Georgia Tech 13. Of course, this game was a couple of days ago. I'm broadcasting to you guys now. I apologize about that. Some things came up and I wasn't able to do it right away. Usually I like to do my shows an hour after the game, but sometimes life happens and here I am talking to you. So let's get into it. Also today we're going to talk a little bit about the preview to the Clemson game. And I have a stat about Michigan football. As you all know, I love Michigan football because Jim Harbaugh and Michigan University are the greatest university of all time, and they're the greatest football university of all time. But let's get started with today's game, or I should say Saturday's game. Final score, Notre Dame 31, Georgia Tech 13. Notre Dame had over 430 yards total offense, 220 yards in rushing, and another 199, just under 200 yards of passing. So, it was a win. I mean, it wasn't pretty. It was kind of an ugly game. Notre Dame had a bad turnover there, which led to a Georgia Tech score. Georgia Tech scored one more other time after that, which was late in the fourth quarter. Georgia Tech did recover an onside kick and made it a little interesting, but Notre Dame was able to hold them back and prevail to win. The game was already decided, but that 31-13 score really doesn't resemble the game. You felt like Notre Dame was up by more because of the time of possession. Notre Dame had over 15 more minutes of time of possession than Georgia Tech did. But Notre Dame's defense doesn't get enough credit for what they've done this year. Notre Dame's defense is the reason why they are undefeated at this point. They are the reason why they are undefeated going into the Clemson game this Saturday at 6:30 on NBC. Now, we always hear about Ian Book and how he needs to pass more. We need to hear about how Notre Dame needs to find more receivers, or we need to hear about how great Notre Dame's offensive line is and how great the running game is. That's true and all. Notre Dame does need to pass the ball better. It's true that they do have a great offensive line, and also they can run the ball very well. However, I really didn't like the certain plays in this game where Ian Book stepped back, looked for a receiver, no one got open, and he had to rush for a couple yards, and a lot of them turned into first downs, which was nice, but you cannot always be that lucky. You can always be that fortunate. Every once in a while, they're going to run into a team with a good linebacker core, and you're going to be contained. And you're only going to be able to get 3 or 4 yards, and it's not going to matter when it's third and long. Now, that's something that really bothers me about this team, is that they cannot be consistent in the passing game. Last week against Pittsburgh, they had over 300 yards, Ian Book did. And Saturday, I keep on saying today, I apologize, had less than 200 yards. So, again, the tight end position, and then your running back, it should not be your number one position to throw to, even though there was a little bit more of flexibility today and also last weekend against Pittsburgh, but it just seems like that Ian Book is too inconsistent with passing. Now, we all know what it is. Their depth with wide receivers isn't very well. Like I said, with the tight end position and the running back, Kyren Williams. By the way, Kyren Williams had a great game again. I mean, he's their star player. I love him. But I just want to see a little bit more consistency. I want to see a little bit more love on the offense. You got to play this way against Clemson this weekend. Clemson, this big story about them, of course, is Trevor Lawrence is not playing, of course, because of the virus, COVID-19, and we will get into that, and I will get into that most importantly. But against Clemson, Notre Dame is going to have more than 200 yards of passing, and they're going to have to run the ball more crispy and much better. And their offensive line is going to have to play the best that they've played all year. And I don't care who the quarterback is behind Clemson, they are a juggernaut. But the only criticism I have for the game against against Georgia Tech in Atlanta, a little bit more consistency. That 31-13 score bothered me. I feel like it should have been like 45-13. I'm acting like a spoiled brat. I'm acting like a child who didn't get what he wanted on Christmas Day. You got the second best gift. But you're still not happy. That's what I am with Notre Dame. That's what I was with this weekend's game. It was late in the fourth quarter, the last drive of the game. I felt like Notre Dame should have scored a touchdown and made it 38-13. That score would have seemed better. Yes, that would have been running up the score. That would have been terrible. That would have been bad sportsmanship. That would have been bad on Brian Kelly. But you know what? You need that to give your team some momentum. You need that to give your offense some momentum. So, a little bit more scoring, a little bit more consistency in the passing, and please find more receivers than just a tight end or Kyren Williams, the running back, because you're going to have, and I've said this all year, it's problematic. Now going into Clemson, which this is going to be fun because you know how this is going to end up. We all Notre Dame fans know how this is going to end up. Notre Dame, if they beat Clemson, they're going to play them twice, depending on if Notre Dame wins the rest of their game. So let's go do a little bit of a hypothetical scenario here. Let's say if Notre Dame loses this weekend, wins the rest of their games, including over Boston College on the road, including North Carolina on the road after Thanksgiving, the Friday after Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Notre Dame loses, like I said, to Clemson, and they go and play Clemson in the ACC championship game against Trevor Lawrence. So my point is that Notre Dame needs to win this weekend's game. And look, yes, I know Trevor Lawrence isn't playing. You like to see him play. You like to see them beat Trevor Lawrence. But I think it's better for Notre Dame going into the regular season game, beating the number one team in the country. I don't care who their quarterback is. When you beat the number one team in the country on national television, when you've been criticized for the last 20 years that you haven't beaten an elite team, when you go in there on your home field and you beat Clemson, I don't care, like I said, who their quarterback is, and you win, that's great. You've beaten an elite team, so-called. You know, I hate using that word, elite, because there's no such thing as a perfect team. That is a term used by these analysts and these overpaid professionals at ESPN and these other networks. Now, here's something that you know is going to happen. Let's say Notre Dame wins. Let's say Notre Dame plays great. Let's say they listen to me. They say they listen to my channel, B Man is Mad, on a Wealthy Irish. Let's say they have 400 yards of passing, 250 yards of rushing. They have no turnovers. They have 2 takeaways against Clemson. They win the game, let's say 28-10. They completely dominate Clemson because their defense takes over. And by the way, Clemson did struggle against Boston College this past weekend. Every once in a while, Clemson does seem to struggle against these lower subpar teams. And Boston College isn't that bad of a team. But I will say this, Notre Dame has a much better defense than Boston College. Okay? So let's say that Notre Dame does beat Clemson this weekend without Trevor Lawrence. You know what they're going to say. You know what the experts are going to say. Well, you know what? Trevor Lawrence wasn't there. You know, it was a road game for Clemson. You know, Clemson wasn't 100%. Notre Dame got lucky. When they play in the ACC championship game, they will get blown out when Trevor Lawrence gets back. You know, this is a win, but there should be an asterisk next to it. Okay, because Notre Dame was lucky and they're overrated. Blah blah blah. You know, you're gonna hear from those assholes at the 4-letter network ESPN. I mean, they're predictable. I know how they are, and I know how they work. So I don't care what you say. If Notre Dame wins this week and they beat Clemson, you've beaten the number one team in the country. You've beaten a so-called elite team, and that will be Brian Kelly's signature win. Okay, I don't care about the game in 2012 against Oklahoma on the road. That's probably his biggest win since he's been here. Notre Dame has a bad record against top 5 teams since Brian Kelly's been here. So this weekend, they need to win this game. They need to play a 99.9% game. You're not going to win perfectly, but if you can catch Clemson off guard, if you can get on them early and you can score a ton of points, more than what Boston College did, do not let them back in this game. Yes, Boston College was up by 18 points at one time against Clemson, but fortunately Notre Dame has a much better defense than Clemson. Notre Dame's defense doesn't get enough credit for what they do. I believe they are a top 5 defense, and also their offense is starting. Even though I said earlier that they need to be more consistent, they're starting to get a little bit of groove with their running, but I'd like to see them run more. But I'd also like to see them be a little bit more aggressive with the passing. And I know I've beaten a dead horse here with this, but their running game is going to be fine. I think you can run the ball up against Clemson. The problem is that if Ian Book cannot run the ball and Notre Dame cannot run the ball and Clemson's defense locks them down, you need to go to the air, and that's the one thing that's really going to bother me. So they need, maybe Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees will work some magic and have some schemes here. It seems like that Brian Kelly, and I've said this many times, prepares better against these top 5 teams during the regular season. He has a week to prepare. It's not a bowl game where you have a couple months to prepare. So this actually works in Notre Dame's benefit. They need to win this weekend's game. Now, does B-Man think they're going to win? Honestly, I don't think they're going to. I think Clemson's too good of a team. I think they're too tough. They have too many weapons. They've got great receivers. They have great tight ends. They got a great running game. Even though their defense gave up a lot of points, they shut out Boston College in the second half. But I think they'll be ready for this game because they're all going to be trying to prove a point that they can win a big game without Trevor Lawrence, and that's dangerous with a team like Clemson, who's already great. So I'm going to be a little bit pessimistic. I could see that Notre Dame losing this game because, I'm sorry, folks, I'm just being truthful with you. I know how Brian Kelly runs his teams. I know how they are. This will be like a 31-20 game, or maybe possibly a 28-14 or 28-17 game. Notre Dame will have their chances, but they'll blow it. Clemson will come up with the big plays. Clemson will come up with the big stops. But this is consistently happen with Brian Kelly when it comes up to big games. He gets close, but not close enough. And that's a big issue with Brian Kelly. He has a subpar 500 record against, below 500 record against top 5 teams he's played during the regular season in the country, including bowl games. Oh, please don't mention the Alabama game. And please, in 2012, oh my God, not the Clemson game 2 years ago at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas for the for the semifinal playoff college football game. That was just that was bad. I try not to remember those games. Those games are terrible, terrible. And please, just if Notre Dame wins this game, like I said, they need to be almost perfect. And I hope Brian Kelly has them ready. But like I said, I've seen how Brian Kelly prepares his teams during the regular season much better than he does against bowl games, but for whatever reason, he just comes up short. Brian Kelly needs to win this game. This will set their season on fire. Now, if they do win this game this weekend, and let's say in impressive fashion, they still got to go to Chestnut Hill, or excuse me, not Chestnut Hill, they still got to go out to Boston College and play Boston College, Boston College has always been a thorn at Notre Dame's side after the Notre Dame's had a big win. Boston College has always been the little annoying fly in the ointment. So if Notre Dame does win this weekend, they need to watch out for Boston College, please. I've seen so many times. They've done it 3 times. Boston College has broken my heart after Notre Dame has started a season undefeated, or they've had a big win the week before. So don't get too excited about, I hate when teams win a big game and then during the week everyone pats them on the back and says you're great, and then they get their butts kicked by, not a greater team than them, but a team that's just good enough to play with them, and they eventually beat them because they had a better day than them. Like you got to watch out for that. I do not love letdowns in college football. That is one thing that really bothers me about college football is letdowns. Like the term in the NFL, any given Sunday. You do not want an any given Saturday for Boston College, especially if Notre Dame does impressively beat Clemson this past weekend. And I don't care who their quarterback is. If Notre Dame beats Clemson and they beat the number 1 team in the country, they have beaten the so-called elite team. Okay, I hate that term. So that will be Brian Kelly's signature win. That'll be Notre Dame's signature win since 1993 when they beat the number 1 team in the country. I hate to say it, Florida State. That was a long time ago. You know how long ago that was? B-Man was in 8th grade. That's how long ago that was. Okay, I mean, ever since then, Notre Dame really hasn't beaten the elite number 1 team consistently, except for that team on the road against Oklahoma. That's it. That's it, folks. They've come close, but not close enough. Against Florida State 6 years ago, against Clemson 5 years ago, against Georgia a few years ago, and of course against Georgia last year when they had a chance to go down that field and win. Georgia was in the top 4 on the road in that loud stadium. But no matter what the situation is, like I said, if Notre Dame wins, you're going to hear the naysayers, like I said, so be ready for that. If Notre Dame wins this Saturday and they go the rest of the season and go undefeated, and they have to play, let's say, Clemson in the ACC championship game. We don't know how Trevor Lawrence is going to react to this virus. Like some of these athletes who've had this virus, it takes them weeks to recover. You saw it with baseball players, with the White Sox. You saw it with other players. It affects their lung, their breathing. It affects their heart. It affects their momentum, their energy. Like it makes them tired and worn down. Like there's a side effect to it. So we don't know what's going to happen with Trevor Lawrence Clemson. I mean, he could overcome this and be great. So we'll have to see. But if Notre Dame does finish the year undefeated and Clemson wins the rest of their games after this weekend, if Notre Dame were to say to beat them, hypothetically, Notre Dame definitely is going to have to play Clemson again, and Trevor Lawrence will be ready for that game. The problem is it's very difficult to beat a team twice in college football. So Clemson probably going to beat Notre Dame the second game. So it's up or down. It's give or take. That's basically what I look at it. I don't expect Notre Dame to win. I'm just giving you hypotheticals here, but yeah, that's just pretty much it. And unless Clemson trips up and Notre Dame has to end up playing Miami and Miami wins the rest of their games, even though there's a tiebreaker between Clemson and Miami because Clemson already beat Miami earlier in the year. I mean, it could be a mess. We'll have to see who has the better records at the end of the year. But hopefully Notre Dame will have to be playing Clemson twice, which means that they'll be playing for the ACC championship game. And like I said, it's very difficult to play teams twice and beat them twice, especially when you have a great team like Clemson with Trevor Lawrence and, of course, their great coach. So that is pretty much it. Basically what I said today. What are the lessons? What did B-Man tell you? That Notre Dame needs to be more consistent with the pass. They need to run the ball crisper against, not Louisville. That was 2 weeks ago, against Clemson this weekend. You need to have a near perfect game. Wasn't really impressed with the Georgia Tech game. A 31-13 score. I really don't like that score. Should have been by a couple more touchdowns. Notre Dame had that bad turnover that gave Georgia Tech a score, which tied the game at one point. But we'll have to see how this game is. You don't know how pissed off I'm going to be after this game, depending on how they lose. If it's a heartbreaker, if it's like 38-35, I'm going to be really depressed and down. But if they get blown out like 49-0, I'll just be pissed off again. Be like, well, this is what Notre Dame is, folks. But if they win, then I'll be very happy. And I'll have to get ready for the naysayers. Because you know what all the naysayers always say? Well, Notre Dame's overrated. They haven't beaten anybody. And even when they do beat somebody, and if they hopefully they beat, Clemson this weekend, we'll hear it. Trust me, we'll hear it. Because I've dealt with these assholes my whole life. And they're hypocrites. And they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Now, that being said, I want to read you a stat that really got my mind thinking. We've heard how great Jim Harbaugh is. We've heard how great of a coach he is. We've heard how great of a program the University of Michigan is. And yet, Michigan has done nothing. Now, here's a stat I want to tell you about. Jim Harbaugh, the great coach who wears khakis, who's very funny and says stupid things to get attention, kind of like the kid in your family who always said stupid shit just to get attention to make everyone laugh. Even though everybody wasn't laughing with him, they were laughing at him. That's what Jim Harbaugh is. Jim Harbaugh's record against Michigan State and Ohio State at home, the Big House, the greatest football stadium in college football, which is a complete freaking dump, by the way. I've told you this 100 times. The stadium is literally in the middle of a city. It's a shithole. It's a dump. It's in a hill. Okay? Their record in the Big House against Michigan State and Ohio State, their two biggest rivalries for the Wolverines, the greatest football program of all time, Jim Harbaugh's record against them is 1-6. 1-6. 1-6. 1-6. Like, how is he a great coach? What has he done? He's done nothing at Michigan. He should have stayed in Stanford. Or he should have stayed when he was at the San Francisco 49ers and took his team to a Super Bowl with a subpar 500. And that's, you can't say subpar 500. Below average quarterback with a great defense. He did that with the San Francisco 49ers. He either should have stayed in the NFL or he should have stayed at Stanford. Because at Michigan, he hasn't done jack shit. And we always hear about, oh, this is a year Michigan's going to do it. Oh, this is a year that they're going to have their good quarterback. Michigan looked terrible on Saturday. From what I saw on the highlights, they just looked bad. I mean, we see this crap every year. They always shut down their pants every year. It's time to push Michigan out of the window. Like I've said 100 times on this channel, Michigan is in the same boat as Notre Dame. Not great anymore. Good. I don't even think Michigan's good. They're not in Ohio State. They're not in Alabama. They're not at Clemson. They're not in Oklahoma. They're in the yard looking in through the window when Oklahoma, Alabama, and Clemson and Ohio State are inside the house staying warm by the log fire. And Notre Dame and Michigan are looking through the window, looking at them saying, we were once that. That's what we want to be. And Michigan is just as worse as Notre Dame when it comes to that category. But folks, that is pretty much it. You know I love Michigan. So every time I talk about Michigan, you should take a shot. It'd be a drinking game. I'd probably talk about them more here on this channel than I do Notre Dame. But you know what? I love bashing Michigan because it's fun, because Michigan fans are delusional. But hopefully this weekend we will be talking about the Notre Dame victory over Clemson, which I don't think they're going to win. I don't like making predictions, folks. Unfortunately, I've got Clemson winning this game, and I'm being honest, like a 31-23 game. I think they're going to win 31-23. Notre Dame will have their chance. They'll come up short. Clemson will have the big play, and Clemson will have the big stop. This is what I've seen too much with Brian Kelly and his teams. Even though it's a regular season game, they have a week to prepare. Like I said, Brian Kelly always seems to come up short, plays decent, plays well. We're not good enough. That's just the kind of coach Brian Kelly is, and that's what I've come to accept. Now, if they surprise me this weekend and they win, I don't care if Trevor Lawrence is not playing or not. They still beat the number one ranked team in the country. You'd like to see him beat Trevor Lawrence twice if they play in the ACC championship game, but unfortunately, we won't see that. But we have to do what we have to live by what we have this weekend, and that's what we're going to have to do is beat them without Trevor Lawrence. Or beat them when they won't have Trevor Lawrence. That's the most important thing. Beat them once, win the rest of your games, go to the ACC championship game, then worry about Trevor Lawrence when he's rested and fully ready to go. That's pretty much it, folks. Hopefully, I'm wrong about my prediction, but you know what? Sorry, folks, 31-23.